Hello and welcome to England Cricket on 99.94 Cricket every day. I'm Daniel Norcross. I've been wandering around Australia for the last, I don't know how long, it feels like my entire life, having to deal with poor laws designed to stop you drinking while standing outside in the street in Australia. Yes, I work
and
for
while
BBC
podcasting.
And while podcasting, yes, which has not been at all easy. But I am joined, as I always am, by the great man himself, the puff pastry hangman, the lead cricket writer of the Press Association. It's Rory Dollard. Rory, I'd love to see you.
Nice to see you, sir. I am not in Australia, I'm afraid, but I've been excited by this whole affair. So we live to fight another day as the England on 99.94 in the World Cup. We've got another match at least.
We do, and we're going to be discussing exactly that. We're going to be discussing England's game against Sri Lanka, that crucial one that got them through to the semi-finals. We will also be looking at, really, where they stand in this tournament. What a crazy, mad tournament it is. And the news that Dawid Malan might not be available for the knockout stages. Is that such a bad thing? Well, we will discuss exactly that. England Cricket on 99.94 is your new home for England cricket content, and we will be dropping into your podcast feed and on YouTube, or the 99.94 app for that matter, several times every week. So do please rate, review, and subscribe. Thank you for joining Cricket's conversation. Now, Rory, let's get straight into the match itself. Sri Lanka. What a strange game it was. Both sides essentially had the same travails. When that ball was hard and new, it went absolutely miles. The moment it got even remotely soft, it was almost impossible to score. I mean, I was sat with Alex Hartley watching that, and I said, is this normal? I mean, some of the ball's gone a bit soft. It's a bit soft. I mean, how could it be that you're going at 10 and over both sides? Pace on the ball, it's flying everywhere. And then once 7-8 overs had gone, it all changed. And in many ways, actually, Adil Rashid's over in the power play was probably the difference between the two teams. He bowled was it the fifth over, I think, and it went for about 2 or 3 runs. And either side of that, runs were going galore. Sri Lanka didn't get that privilege in the power play. England were just a little bit ahead at that point and ended up winning the game. It was such a strange game to watch. What did you make of it?
It was a funny one, wasn't it? It was, and I think to some extent, England cricket fans maybe, I don't know, it feels like they beat themselves up a bit or beat the team up at least, maybe not themselves, but they are through and they got through. They needed a win. No run rate was involved. They just needed to win. They got the win. So there's an element of just in a knockout tournament, really, is just if you're over the line, you can kind of suck it up and start again. But it was a weird one, no doubt about it. Sri Lanka looked like they were going to make life extraordinarily difficult for England with a big total. 180 probably was 180 was right. It was right alive. Then 160 looked like that was where they were going to stumble to. And England did this thing where they dragged it back with the ball, which is something they're starting to make a little bit of a habit of, dragging things back. And then the game was out of sight in the power play, wasn't it? And I think we hadn't realised quite how important that hard ball was in the power play, because although the thing had just unfolded in front of us, didn't necessarily think we were going to have a retread right the way through. So England probably in their batting will feel that they got themselves in a little bit of a pickle that they didn't need to. Their sort of big gun middle order didn't quite negotiate the innings quite as they should. But they have a fella called Ben Stokes. And when, this is almost, is it not almost the exact situation that whenever they were asked about Ben's place in the team, everyone around the team said, well, yeah, but when things are on the line, you need to look at this fella. And things were on the line. He stood up, didn't do it. Listen, this innings it's not going to sit alongside 2019 or Cape Town as sort of on his highlights reel, because it was undramatic and unexciting in some ways, but it was precisely what he needed to do. And this was Ben Stokes, the equation cricketer. He's like, what do I need to do to get to where I want to get to? And that's what he did. And that's probably... That's probably
Rory,
a big takeaway, isn't it? Ben Stokes got into this tournament big time, and that's what England needed.
Yes. And look, he's been doing a little bit with the ball and proving a lot of people wrong with what he can do with the ball in T20 cricket. I think the issue that England watchers have had and analysts have had is Stokes and Malan. And that has been the problem, because there's two anchors there, 3 and 4. And also, in fairness, we've got a couple of things to talk about here when it comes to England's batting. Stokes obviously being one of them and doing what you would need him to do in a low run chase. And the people shouldn't forget that in T20 cricket there are quite a few relatively low run chases on difficult pitches. Not every pitch is a 180 pitch, so you need someone who can think cricket along those lines. But really, Harry Brook's situation in Australia has been getting progressively worse, and is that simply because if you look at every game he's come in to play, he's come in at a particular time. It's not been quite as easy for him to play his shots in the same way as he did in Pakistan. I don't know. I don't think that's true. I think he's actually struggling in Australian conditions, and this is creating a slight problem with England's batting order, because Brook is at 5, naturally expected to come in after the 2 anchors, and then Livingston and Mowing. So I don't know. I mean, where do you stand on Brook's travails?
It's not quite working out, and it's not quite working out from a point of view where every situation he's walked into in the last 6 or 7 months, he's breezed. He hasn't. It doesn't feel. I could be wrong, but it doesn't feel like he's had to work awfully hard. It feels like he's come in, ball's been bouncing nicely off the bat. He's felt like $1 million, give or take. Even when he made his Test debut and sort of got out cheaply, he did it in a way that he seemed absolutely at ease with. And he doesn't look like that now. So, I mean, looking at the options they have around the squad, I don't really see a way in which Harry Brook doesn't continue playing. I feel like they're fairly committed to that. And, it could be a case of they just ride it out, and it could be just the case of if they get 1 innings out of him in this tournament, because there's only 2 games left, semi-final and a final at most, it might just be that they wear it, because I can't rejig this team in my head in such a way that Brook doesn't play. So I think we see a little bit more. We see a little bit more of what he's about.
Let's get on to bowling, because it was extraordinarily good at the back end of the innings. It was put into a little bit of perspective by how Sri Lanka bowled at the back end of England's innings, it's got to be said, which is what partly prompted my uncertainty about what we're actually watching on these pitches. It is definitely harder to bat in the last 10 overs than the first 10 overs, and I think going forward people are going to need to try to maximise that first 10 a little bit more than they currently are. They're sort of saving a little bit for the back 10, and it's not really working. But England's bowling, without Reece Topley, and he would have been the go-to name, Sam Curran has been something else, hasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, as you said, Topley was certainly inked in for that job. And it was something he had grooved quite nicely. He had a real certainty about what he was going to do. And he looked really, really good for these conditions, actually, that both the conditions England were expecting and what we actually ended up seeing look like Topley would have been a nice option. But Sam Curran he's gone from being sort of a bonus in the team. And it really wasn't a certainty that he was going to be in this team few weeks, a couple of months ago. He was not really, he was an extra. He was a bonus player, really. So he's gone from finding a way to chip in, helping out in some of the less tight games. He's an absolute dead set banker. Like, if he doesn't go well in the death overs, England haven't got a plan, because the current plan is Sam Curran, and he's turning up every time. Now, whether he can be expected, he's going at less than a run a ball across the tournament, right? And bowling at difficult times. Yeah, bowling at really difficult times. So, a semi-final and a final, you you do expect that he cannot do this every single time because nobody does. Death bowlers get hit. And whether England can continue, I don't know, but he's certainly their best bet. And listen, Wood, again, I thought Wood was going to bowl through the middle. I thought that was the job they had for him. And he's having to do something different. And he really stepped up. And in a really tight finish like that, the way he closed out at overs 18 and 20, when he'd only bowled one over prior to that, and it had been hit around a bit for 17 runs, showed some real serious ticker on his part as well. And there's no doubt about ticker with Mark Wood. But yeah, England have found a way into these death overs, but they've bowled different people in them as well. Stokes has bowled death as well. So they're getting through, but everyone's getting through this tournament, and that's probably what we're gonna discuss when we look at the thing in the round.
Well, it really is unusual in that way. But just quickly on Wood again, is that, I see Wood as being England's Nortje, and today Nortje bowled 4 overs and took 1 for 10. He was absolutely magnificent against the Netherlands. How South Africa lost that when they've got a bowler who bowled 4 overs, 1 for 10, I have no idea, but they did.
Yeah.
And England want to use Wood like that, but if they're going to use Wood like that, they need to use him outside the power play because, Nortje and quick bowlers, they need protection. So the bats are flying; they're going everywhere.
Yeah, totally.
And if you've only got 2 men out, then you get exposed pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And I think England have got to be a little bit more careful about him in the power play. If they can possibly avoid him in there,
agree.
South Africa tend to do with Nortje, then you'll get the best out of him. Anyway.
Yeah, and listen, well, before we just not negate the fact that Adil Rashid was. I guess I was a little bit early on the Rashid's a bit of a concern boat, and it was back in Pakistan.
You weren't early. You weren't early. I mean, I think he probably bowled the most important over of the entire match in the power play.
Yeah,
but he hadn't looked like doing that before then.
Yeah,
I think you were dead right. But
if England, listen, I said the other week when Rashid is performing at 8 and 9 out of 10, England's way through a match looks way easier. And if we're sort of making a prediction about how they're going to pan out in the semis and maybe the final if they get there, if you can tell me Rashid will bowl at 9 out of 10, I think they've got a pretty significantly better chance because he hasn't been there and he turns up in the big game where it matters, and that's what you need when it gets down to the scratchy bit.
Well, do you know what, Rory? Because this is the end of the first part, we're going to talk about that and how the tournament is evolving and how people like Adil Rashid are going to come more into the game. There's our first break. After that, we will talk about precisely that.
You're listening to Cricket's Conversation on 99.94. Whatever your team, we have the show for you on podcast, YouTube, or on the 99.94 app. We have India, England, South Africa, West Indies, and now Sri Lanka covered. If you want to find us, the best way is to follow us on social media at 9994DM by downloading the 9994 app or Google 99.94 on podcast. We speak cricket.
So, Rory, I've been out here for a while and I would say the tournament has developed a little bit. Spinners of a certain kind had some success early on, but essentially there was a quicker bowlers tournament. We were on fresh pitches. There were cold pitches. There was not a lot of movement through the air. We were in October, for heaven's sake, in Australia. It's just starting to warm up in Adelaide today. It was 26 degrees, nice conditions. The pitch just was a little bit more grabby. There was a little bit more turn. We've not seen any turn, really, throughout most of October. Just starting to see a little bit as the pitches dry up. And I thought it was really noticeable. Certainly where we are here, but also looking on the games in Sydney, where the pitches have got more tired, more old, and there's let's face it, semi-final in Sydney coming up on Wednesday. Different kinds of bowlers, I think, are going to come into the tournament. And this is where Pakistan really would concern me if I was partisan and I cared.
Yep.
I wanted England to win. The actual tournament is sort of being set up for Pakistan for quickish spinners and lightning fast bowlers who are prepared to test a full length on really enormous stadia. Sydney's pretty big, Melbourne's massive, Adelaide's got wide open expanses. I wonder, I think this is where Adil Rashid, from an England point of view, is going to come into his own.
Yeah, well, he has to, because England have won white ball games on Adil Rashid's shoulders for a long time. And as much as the Owen Morgan reboot of England's cricket, limited overs cricket, as much as you think about Hales and Roy and Bairstow and smashing it, and it really, at exactly the same time, England worked out they had a really, really, really good leg spinner who could take wickets when it was there for him, who could tighten the thing up. And he's, an absolute cornerstone of that whole thing. Now, he had slipped in this last couple of months. He didn't play much in the summer. Obviously, he went on the Hajj. He didn't really impact the series in Pakistan at all. And he had a slow start out here. So he'd sort of shuffled himself down the pecking order a bit of importance. But listen, as you said, with the way conditions are looking, with the opponents England might be expecting to face, he's dead centre. He's absolutely dead centre. And whether they need to think about getting more out of Livingston and Moeen, if the pitch demands it, is interesting, because what England have done the last couple of games is been flexible and fluid and worked out. They have a ton of options, and Butler has not been too rigid in how he's used them. Might be that comes again.
Rory, I agree entirely. I think one of the things I want to talk to you about is Butler's captaincy. Now, a lot of psychobabble has talked about captaincy, but I guess a lot of it is also worked out in the changing room. But the confidence that Butler has had to go with gut, to bowl Moeen in the power play against New Zealand, to bowl Stokes against Sri Lanka, slightly more than he had done in the previous game, to bowl Livingston a lot, just to read pitch and to understand it. I thought he had a really deft touch, actually, in the game against Sri Lanka.
We're starting to see a little bit of the Jos Buttler, the captain that England told us they were appointing. The guy who'd played all around the world, played tons of matches, watched, listened, learned, had a bit of wise counsel, a bit of composure. That's who we were told we were getting. Had a bit of a slow start over the summer. Didn't quite feel like he'd asserted himself. It does now. This feels like Jos Buttler's team, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And actually players are starting to talk about that too.
Yeah, I just think the way you look at it now, that England probably would have ended up in the semi-finals of this tournament under Owen Morgan, but I don't think they've done it this way. I think Butler has got to grips with this squad, and it's evolving a little bit. And there'll be a couple more shibboleths need to disappear before it's really, really his team. But he understands it now, and I think in the heat of battle, I think he has an idea of who to use when. And that's a really handy thing, because it does feel like a tournament where a really fixed plan of bowler A bowls over 6, bowler B bowls over 10. It doesn't feel like it's going to go that way.
Well, I think another reason for that is that really to understand what goes on out here in Australia, you've got to watch the games and live and understand what pitches they're using and see how tiny the squares are. And you'll know this, Rory, from being out here before. This isn't like being in England where there are squares with 18 pitches. There are a very limited number of pitches and very few venues that people are playing on. And the pitches you're seeing later on are getting more and more tired. And I thought it was interesting to see how Hales responded, actually, on these pitches. In a way, it sort of suited his game a little bit more. I thought against Sri Lanka, he was so bold. It was the Hales that you kind of think of it's the first 6, 7, 8 overs of the game to break it open. You've got to attack hard, I think, while these pitches are the way they are, and as the balls get softer and softer and softer. We were looking into routes, in the UAE T20 World Cup, and it was all about the dew. The pitches really didn't come into it. It was just simply about how impossible it was to bowl in second innings. Here, what you're looking at is a limited number of surfaces that people are playing on, and they are getting a little bit tired. Aussie pitches do deteriorate, and you've got to score quick up front. And England, I think, look, we're going to come on to it in the third part, might have accidentally found themselves with the right combination of people to go hard up front.
Just quickly, what about Adelaide? I mean, you've been out there. What do you think? How do you think Adelaide plays for England's interests?
Well, I mean, extreme pace works very well at Adelaide, and spin. And England.
So it's Wood and Rashid.
It's Wood, Rashid. It's also Livingston, and there may be opportunity for Moeen too, because the straight boundaries are sufficiently long at Adelaide. You've got quite short square boundaries, so Moeen may come into play a little bit as well. And it's actually you just got to target the right, because the square boundaries are pretty short at Adelaide. So going risky on the slower bouncer, that'll be an issue for someone like, say, Sam Curran, because on either side at Adelaide Oval, you don't have an awful lot to play with, and top edges quite easily go and miss hits go. So down the ground is where it's we've seen hardly any sixes down the ground, and that I think will probably bring Livingston and Moeen into play a bit more.
Talking about Adelaide taking spin, it was Adelaide, wasn't it, where Ollie Robinson bowled spin in the Ashes, I think.
That's right. Yeah.
England got their equation a little bit wrong that time. They left out the spinner and ended up asking Ollie Robinson to bowl it in his shades. So hopefully they don't drop Adil Rashid for the game in Adelaide.
Well, look, let me be clear. When I say it takes spin, it deviates a little bit. It's an Australian pitch, so it doesn't take spin, but it assists the slower bowler and is increasingly doing so. Now then, it's time for our second break. After this, we're going to be talking about, Dawid Malan. How do you replace one of the most highly ranked batters in ICC World T20 cricket? Or, in doing so, do you make the side stronger? We'll find out after the break.
If you love the language of cricket and want more, then head over to the 99.94 app and you can hear all of our podcasts and cricket commentary. We're adding new shows all the time and covering cricket series from all over the world. Be the first to hear all of our announcements by following us on social media at 9994DM. Welcome to Cricket's Conversation.
Welcome back. Dawid Malan didn't look in great fettle. Looks like he might be injured. Isn't definitely out. Is that right, Rory?
Yeah, as far as we know, I mean, England won't make that decision. You wouldn't have thought. There's no real need for them to make a hard decision, or at least publicise it. They'll probably know a bit earlier than they say. But you would think, the way he looked, that they'll be already thinking about what to do without him. And I think we should proceed along those lines, because it's more interesting to sort of work out how you make a change. Because England have made a bit of a virtue of sticking with this team, and any changes they've made have been within the use of the team and how they deploy people at certain times. And Milan's been part of that. He's shuffled up and down the order as required. Now, I have at times earlier in this tournament advocated for Chris Jordan and thinking he was the way to strengthen this team. And looking at the number of balls people were facing, I thought, you can do this. You can shuffle everyone up, find another bowling option, give yourself another way into the game at the end. I've changed my mind. I now think they should probably play Phil Salt. They should, and it goes back to what you were saying earlier in this episode, which was how people are going to really, really max it when the going's good at the top of the innings. And the way to do that is to get Phil Salt in and just have another guy throw in the bat, even harder than Hills and Butler. Salt is really aggressive. And with almost selflessly so, he doesn't care really how he goes. He's just going to do his part for the team. And I think now also at this stage of the tournament, semi-final time, I think drafting Jordan in and asking him to bowl the death overs when he hasn't been in the team, when other people have been doing that job, that now at this point feels like a push for me.
I totally agree with you. It strikes me that it's the most obvious move England can make, and it actually is a move that they sort of should have made right at the beginning. There was a logical nonsense, in a way, to Malan and Stokes at 3 and 4. I think it's put pressure on Brook at 5 and the players below that as well. I think that by chance, by circumstance, I was in a bar when Malan was injured. It's a terrible thing to say because I think Malan is a very fine cricketer, very, very good cricketer, very good T20 cricketer. But because England were going to pick Stokes, when it was he that pulled up lame and everyone said, oh God, is that Stokes? Oh God, is that Hales? Oh God, is that someone? And it was Malan. And it was kind of, oh, thank God. and that's a dreadful thing to say because, he's a very fine cricketer. But the way England set up, if they are going to play Stokes, then Salt in that top 4 is by far the more logical option if they're going to bat so deep, which is what they do. They bat down to Wokes. Or they bat down to Rashid, really, if truth be told. And Wood can fling about.
Wood can hit sixes. He can hit sixes, yeah.
He can hit sixes. So you find yourself in a situation where you wonder, why would you have another anchor? And it's got to be Salt, hasn't it? Because they demonstrated they can find 7 bowlers. As the pitches get more grabby, and they just give a little bit more to the spinners, it brings in their, I say part-timers, but Livingston and Moeen come into the equation as well as Rashid. Curran's a go-to must. Wood is going to bowl the quick overs. I mean, Wokes is there to get wickets up front. They've got everything they could possibly want, haven't they?
Looks like it. And I really did see a role for Jordan in the team at the start of the tournament. And I just think the way it's panned out has nudged what he brings just a little bit down the must-have list. And it does feel like, I think weirdly, the game that Malan gets injured in is the game where he might have really proved his worth. Because chasing that total with that power play score that the openers put up, in all likelihood, him and Stokes in the 2 anchors role waltz it, don't they? They probably just work it round, and he turns up, he gets 35 not out, 38 not out, and he goes, "That's what I'm here for. This is what I do," and sort of shows his usefulness. Now, that being England having sort of got through that, it does now feel like Salt could be a really interesting emergency button just to unleash him in a semi-final and say, just, do what you do, have a little swing. And if, Salt could, he's one of those players, and this is T20 being slightly silly, but he could hit a really decisive 20. One that a 20 that just gets you where you shouldn't be. Yeah. So it does feel like an intriguing option. And in a tournament where things have been settled by these kind of fine margins and where we think the rhythm of the tournament is shifting a little bit, England would have to be really, really tempted by Salt. And the injury to Malan might just be the little nudge that makes them pull the cord. I mean, we'll talk a little bit. We'll do a podcast previewing this India game because India have loads of stuff to talk about as well. But
yes.
England only really have one decision to make, don't they? Everyone else has found their spot and found their way into this tournament. And it does feel like there's one decision to make. And Salt is unusually carefree. Like, if you were asking anyone, do you fancy coming in for your first appearance of the tournament in semi-final time? He seems like the easiest to do because he just plays that way whenever he rocks up to the crease. It does feel like a low risk, doesn't it?
It does, Rory. I mean, would it be fair to say that you are advocating rubbing salt into Malan's wound?
I guess I would be. I guess mine would be. I mean,
you would be.
I was gonna go for something about seasoning, bad
Well, he's
season.
a
I don't
seasoned
know.
professional. He's a seasoned professional,
He is, yeah.
right? And we always mention it, especially when he plays against Marcus Pepper, whatever his name is.
But
Kyle.
what
What?
what I would say about Milan, though, I feel terribly sorry for him because his Ashes ended in Australia really difficultly. He's missed the birth of his child to take part in a series that was dwindling down the pan. Really tough end to his campaign, that, and he had started the Ashes exceptionally well, really, by England standards. And now his World Cup is in this back. He's back in Australia not even a year later, and he's having another dose of bad luck. So disappointed for him because he's put a lot into his England career.
It is disappointing, but look, I'm in Australia and I don't expect anything other than disappointment. It's an extraordinary country filled with disappointing things. Thank you for listening to England on 99.94. I thought that was quite great. Good.
I like Adelaide. Adelaide's my favourite. Adelaide's my favourite place in Australia.
I absolutely love Adelaide. Look, there's many good things in Australia, but no is their favourite word. No. Silly Johnson, no. I'm just standing out. I'm literally standing on the sidewalk, having a drink with a friend, asking what we should do about when we should go in. So don't stand there. You can't stand and drink. You can only sit and drink. It's an extraordinary place. Anyway, we obviously love you, Australia, for being some kind of weird, twisted prism of our own existence. And thank you for listening to England Cricket on 99.94, where we speak cricket and moderate bigotry against Australia every day, incidentally. Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you enjoy your podcast. You can download the 99.94 app, follow us on Twitter at Norcross Cricket, and Rory at
the RVD, baby, but without the baby.
Without the baby, at the RVD. The RVD. Never miss out. Join our 24/7 conversation on social media and follow us at 994DM. Cricket every day, your way. We'll be back in no time.